Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and all you lovely people out there. Whether you're listening from the wasteland or from the best little town at the bottom of the deep blue sea, this is Fallout Rapture. And today, folks, I'm going to be doing a follow-up to my previous video on Resident Evil Requiem, aka Resident Evil 9. In this video, I'm going to be doing part 1 of a small 3-part series talking about what I think we could be seeing in RE9, in regards to unknown plot points, how I think the game will be structured to tell a story, and finally, some concerns regarding possible plot points and story beats. Originally, these topics were going to be part of a character video I did in June, but because of time constraints, I had to cut them. For this video, I'm going to discuss what I think we might be seeing with some of the unexplained plot points of the game so far, and my reasoning. Before we begin, like with my last video, there will be spoilers for the entirety of the Resident Evil series in here, so viewers beware. I also want to say that these are just my thoughts and ideas for the game, based off what I've seen from the trailers and online, along with my own knowledge of the series. I'm saying this just in case of the million-1 chance where I get something right and somebody from Capcom finds this and decides to release the corporate lawyers. Or maybe zombie dogs are more appropriate in this case. Or say, well, the fans are guessing too much of the plot, we need to rewrite it. It's unlikely, but better to cover the bases. But without further ado, let's get into it. So first off, let's establish what we already know about Resident Evil Requiem's plot so far. Most of this comes from Requiem's official website and the trailers that have been released so far, which I'll link down in the description for those who haven't seen them and want to watch them or visit them themselves. So, what we know of the overall plot is this. The game takes place in 2028, 30 years after the Raccoon City disaster. Whether that means actually 30 years, meaning the game takes place near the end of September, or just a year, we don't know yet. We play as Grace Ashcrofts, an intelligence analyst for the FBI who is assigned to investigate the Wrenwood Hotel, where the most recent and batch of mysterious deaths via an unknown disease has occurred. This is hard for Grace, however, as her mother, Alyssa Ashcroft, a survivor of the Raccoon City disaster, was seemingly murdered there 8 years prior. A quick side note for this. Like any game or movie, unless you see the body disintegrated right in front of you, there's always the possibility that they'll come back, especially in Resident Evil. Grace, according to the website, then goes to investigate the hotel alone, and from the trailers is seemingly kidnapped and brought to a hospital-like area, which, according to people online via enhancing one of the official screenshots posted by Capcom, is seemingly the Rhodes Hill Chronic Care Center. If this is accurate, then that means we're already in Raccoon City, as Rhodes Hill is an area of Raccoon City that was established via a subway stop for it in Resident Evil Outbreak File 2's Underbelly scenario. From there, according to the official website, the game is about how the investigation of this one case leads to uncovering the hidden truth behind the outbreak in Raccoon City, the biological disaster that shook the world. So that's the info we have, and it's both a lot and a little at the same time. We know the game's prime location and when it's going to take place, along with a couple of secondary locations, who our main character is, and seemingly some background details that could come into play for some revelation moments throughout the game. And most importantly, a basic idea of the end goal for the game's story. However, the other plot points that they haven't talked about, such as who's the antagonist and their motivations, what's so special about the Ashcrofts, why Raccoon City after all this time, and most importantly, what's the hidden truth that I want to speculate on. So to start off, I want to talk about our main antagonist, who seems to be the hooded figure from the trailers, and how his background / who he is leads into all the other unknown plot points I want to talk about. What we know so far from the trailers is this. Our hooded figure, from his voice and build, seems to be an older man, and that he's been searching for someone for a while, and that one of the two Ashcrofts, as he doesn't say the person's name he's talking to, fits the bill as a special one, as we see from this clip here.
I know now that you're the one that I've been searching for. The special one. The chosen one. Miss Ashcroft.
My theory so far is this. I think our antagonist is going to be an original character, possibly a former Umbrella researcher, or maybe somebody in the US government who had connections with Umbrella, or even possibly was part of the US's own bioweapons program before being let go following Raccoon City's destruction. At the very least, he's going to be somebody involved in the study of viruses. The reason why I think it's going to be an original character instead of a returning antagonist, like so many people have suggested with Wesker, Spencer, or mentioned but not seen antagonists like Brandon Bailey and others, is something I'll get more in depth with in the concerns section. But the base reason is that I think it would feel off for an original character like Grace in her first go round to face and defeat someone she has no personal connection or past with, but in turn has a lot of connections with the other protagonists in the series as a whole. It would kind of be like building up a main character or antagonist over multiple movies or games, only to cut the protagonist in the final one and replace them with an entirely new character. There isn't that connection or emotional payoff to the defeat of the antagonist now. This is not a reference, by the way, but I'm fairly certain people have felt like this has happened before. However, getting back to our antagonist, his possible work with viruses ties into his motivations and how it relates to the Ashcrofts and why we are back in Raccoon City in the first place. At the end of Outbreak File 1, we get a cutscene which shows Raccoon City has been quarantined, and what looks like the United States government is studying something that has actually survived the bombing of the city, even 6 months after the disaster. I figure our hooded villain might have been one of the research staff there, or a Fire and Umbrella employee who somehow got a hold of information on what's going on there. Like most people in Resident Evil, I believe our hooded figure becomes obsessed with the T-virus that thoroughly wiped out an entire town, and tries to find a way to improve it, or even create his own strain based off what survived Raccoon City's destruction. Unfortunately, sometime after Raccoon City's destruction, he's either let go of the United States government, or because he's an Umbrella employee, has no way to access the city. But his drive to improve the virus is still there, and all he has to do is wait the United States government out. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that the US, like the BSAA and other countries in the Resident Evil universe, after a while just left the Raccoon City quarantine zone to rot. It's a thing that's actually occurred to a couple of zones like the Kajuju Autonomous Zone in Africa from Resident Evil 5, according to Umbrella Corps, which I think is still technically canon. Our hooded figure then simply slips in and makes Raccoon City again fulfill its purpose that it had under Umbrella, to serve as a cover for the horrible and illegal experiments going on there. After all, who looks for a new virus or bioweapons in an already destroyed and quarantined city? Not only does this answer why our villain set up shop in Raccoon City for a virus that can survive a literal firebomb, and why we're being drawn back here all these years later, but I also think it explains how our antagonist got a group of people to help him. From the stuff we see in the trailer, especially with the appearance of the hospital area / clinic and the unknown woman there, this doesn't feel like a single person operation. In fact, besides RE0, I don't think any game has had a single person causing / doing everything in an outbreak. So I presume there's a group of people who are helping our hooded figure. As for who would help him? Why, those would be the survivors of Raccoon City, of course. As I discussed in my character video on who I think will appear in RE9 / Requiem, the US government completely covered up Raccoon City following destruction in order to conceal the fact that they were involved in and knew about the bioweapons that Umbrella was creating. This included covering up the existence of BOWs altogether. In fact, by the time of Resident Evil 7, people tried to speak up about the truth of Raccoon City were seen as conspiracy theorists still because of this cover-up. I propose that our hooded figure either joins the support group for the family members and survivors of the city, as a fake person who survived or lost someone, and stirs up resentment in the group, or, depending on if he's former US government or Umbrella, comes forward as a remorseful government agent or scientist, and tells them the truth about the government's involvement. The group is outraged, but people higher up in the group and calmer members proclaim that the government will eventually reveal the truth, that the truth will come out. They just have to be patient. But as more and more biohazards happen and anniversaries fly by, that patience and calmness the group once had slowly deteriorates until they're foaming at the mouth for revenge. Some for their loved ones, some for losing everything and being othered by the world, maybe even some for being forced to live in the ruins of Raccoon City because they have nowhere else to go. And at the head of it all is a hooded figure directing their efforts for revenge. They start off small, kidnapping quote-unquote government agents that the hooded figure directs them to, people he proclaims knew about Raccoon City or were responsible for ordering the sterilization operation. He says holding them hostage will get the government to finally release the information. In actuality, they're just providing him test subjects for the different versions of his virus. Most are just low-ranking people he proclaims were demoted, but they don't need to know that. But each time the truth didn't come out and the agent quote-unquote escaped or died suddenly, the group slowly turned more and more radical, going from simple kidnapping to killing agents or injecting them with viruses so that they could feel what their loved ones went through. Poetic justice and all that. This is also where I believe the bodies mentioned in the trailer came from. Failed test subjects or people kidnapped for the purpose of leading Grace back to the hotel. This also helps explain the two older men in the trailer, who I believe were either conducting their own investigation, as it stated that Grace went to the hotel alone, or were lured there by the hooded figure. With one seemingly killed in the hotel and one, well, I'll talk about him a bit more in the structure section. As for plausibility, we've actually seen something like this happen before with Curtis Miller in Resident Evil Degeneration. In that movie, he was a man who lost his family in the Raccoon City disaster, and after learning the truth of the government's involvement, enacted a plan of setting outbreaks to pressure the government into revealing the truth behind Raccoon City. If one man could do the damage that he did in Degeneration, 7 years after Raccoon City, imagine what a whole group can do after 30 years of anger and rage. Now you may be wondering, well, how does this all link to the Ashcrofts in the first place? Well, ask yourself this. How do you make a virus stronger in the first place? By making it able to overcome the vaccine that's supposed to stop it. That's how. In the world of Resident Evil, one of the cures and vaccines for the T-virus is a substance called daylight, introduced in Resident Evil Outbreak's final scenario, Decisions. In this final scenario, George Hamilton, a surgeon and Raccoon General, is called to a local university by a former classmate of his, Peter Jenkins, saying that he has vital information on the outbreak in the city. Upon arriving, we find Peter dead, and VI's notes learn that with the help of an on-the-run umbrella scientist, made an antiviral substance that eliminates any T-virus in the body and vaccinates the person against it, which he named Daylight. But, surprise surprise, the umbrella scientist wanted the substance for his own purposes, and killed Peter seemingly after the man wised up to what was going on. The scenario then plays out with the player following Peter's notes to find the components they need to make the vaccine for themselves and escape from the city with a sample, just barely making it out before the whole city is bombed by the military. However, I'm not saying that Alyssa and Grace are targeted here just because Alyssa was possibly cured with Daylight in Outbreak, and Grace might have in her blood by proxy. This is actually something that the Residents of Evil predicted on their YouTube channel, saying that Alyssa was targeted because she was possibly cured with Daylight before escaping the city. But I'm gonna go a bit further than that. You see, I think it's the particular Daylight that Alyssa, and by proxy Grace, might have in their blood, that is the reason why the hooded figure is after them. See, Daylight is actually still around in the Resident Evil universe, as BSAA advisor Doug Wright in the Resident Evil The Marwa Desire manga, which serves to showcase some of the events that occurred before RE6, actually tells the person in charge of the school he's called to investigate for a potential biohazard and showing a zombified student that they need Daylight to vaccinate all the other students, thinking that it's the T-virus, but in actuality it's the still unknown at the time C-virus. So if Antagonist needs somebody with Daylight in their veins, there's bound to be plenty of people out there. Case in point, in the same manga we see Chris dealing with T-virus-based BOWs in the mall's stateside, showing the T-virus is still an infected bioweapon and still has a need for a vaccine for survivors or early-stage victims. I also think this adds more weight to our hooded figure's possible obsession with the T-virus, or making his own virus from it, as it seems to be one of the few bioweapons that hasn't been made defunct, unlike some newer viruses, despite it being more than 30 years old. But back to Daylight and the Ashcrofts, you see, to make Daylight in the final scenario of Outbreak, you need 3 things. Special chemical compound called P-base, a toxin for mutated T-virus wasps, V-poison, and T-blood, which is just blood from any creature infected with the T-virus. You can then take all these components and place them in a pre-programmed incubator/centrifuge, and voila, you have Daylight. This, however, is where Alyssa and the rest of the Outbreak characters become unique from the rest of the population. Since Daylight is, I presume, the recommended vaccine, or at least used by the BSAA, it would somehow have to be mass-produced, as something tells me they found ways to substitute certain things such as the P-venom, use something like Hunter or Zombie for the T-blood, as it would be extremely dangerous otherwise to get the raw materials or not enough for major outbreaks. In Decisions, however, not only does George and the Outbreak characters use actual pea venom, but the blood they used was from an experimental tyrant called Thanatos, which was created by Dr. Greg Mueller, the Umbrella scientist who used Pure to make daylight. This makes this batch of daylight very unique and probably powerful, considering they used the blood of a human who was compatible with the virus and turned into a tyrant. I mean, just look what he does to the UBCS team that was sent to get a blood sample from him, and what happens when he mutates.
Target is closing in! All right, come on.
The thing's too huge. These 9mm are useless.
Almost got him. Hold on!
Calm down. You must give me your blood.
Hey, something's wrong. So, let's regain our distance then. What the? You!
Impressive. I won't underestimate it next time. It must be going to the man. Might as well set it up. Just in case.
So Alyssa has a pretty powerful and very unique version of daylight in her blood. And if you were able to reverse engineer and use that to make a virus strain that can overcome that version of the vaccine, you have one heck of a weapon. But why target Alyssa specifically? And after 22 years, you might ask, as she was seemingly killed/captured 8 years before the events of the game. My guess is there wasn't a lot of info on or telling by the Outbreak survivors of where they were in the city after the disaster. Along with this, survivors like David Kane seemingly were elsewhere in the city on the morning of October 1st, as shown in the end of the road scenario from Outbreak File 2. So it was also a question who was actually at the university to get daylight. My guess is this: George Hamilton, who based off his ending in File 2 may have helped with the production of, or at least research of the vaccine after the city, may have mentioned in passing that he was at the university and the specifics of daylight's creation over the years. And that's where the hooded figure first learns of this more powerful version of the vaccine, via moving through similar social circles as George or by pure happenchance. The problem is he can't just snatch George for the daylight in his blood. Helping recreate or produce the vaccine probably means that George has a lot of powerful groups keeping eyes on him, and kidnapping him will draw too much attention. Too big of a chance to lead them back to Raccoon City and ruin everything. But say our hooded figure caught word of one of George's fellow survivors asking him to come forward and tell the truth, or mention the university, and through research, he discovers Alyssa Ashcroft, a reporter who, I predicted in my character video, has repeatedly made wild claims about Raccoon City over the years, who has bounced around from local paper to paper every time she makes a new one, or her past catches up to her and she's blacklisted and let go. It's his best bet. He sets a trap, but claims he has proof of what happened in the city that can't be denied, and she takes it. But Alyssa fails him in the end. But maybe her daughter will have what he's looking for in her blood. Maybe he already has it, those bloody bandages on Grace from the trailer or anything to go by. Maybe he also left her something too. So he starts killing people in places that would cause government agencies to investigate, with a virus he made on the side, or maybe an earlier version of his that's so different that the FBI doesn't recognize it as T. In order to get Grace to investigate, we'll have one of the bodies show up at the place her mother was murdered, and maybe even have her bosses on her to investigate it, if he has that connection. I mean, it's odd that you're sending an intelligence analyst to investigate a crime scene after all. And if the DSO or any other organization send their people there, claim they're trying to silence the truth and have the survivor group dispose of them or take them for experiments. As for our villain's motivations, it might just be to improve the virus and sell it off, or keep it for his own, or something slightly more complicated than that. Remember, the main point of the game is not only Grace's story, but also how it ends up exposing the hidden truth of Raccoon City, which is hopefully the fact that it was a covered up T-virus outbreak. I feel like if the villain's motives are too complicated or too over the top, it'll take away from that, and make it feel like the game is fighting between telling two different stories at the same time. But that's just what I think. But that's the end of my thoughts for now. I would love to hear what you guys thought in the comments, what you agreed with, what you think is less likely to happen, and your own theories on what we might see in RE Requiem / RE9. In the upcoming part 2, I plan to talk about how I think the game's plot will be structured, taking the known plot points, the stuff I talked about and hinted here, and some new things in that video, and giving a rough idea on how the game will play out from start to end. I'll also be linking the character video I did on RE9 at the end of this video if you want to check that out, and feel free to leave a like if you did enjoy this video. But until next time you hear me on the radio, have a good life, have a good day, and have a good night. See you then, folks.